All right. So thank you very much for your patience, and I will now call to order this meeting of the school committee at 5:39 on February 15th, 2022. First, I will read the agenda for this evening. We will begin with communications from the school committee and the administration, followed by public comment, followed by reports and discussion items, including a single item update on the DESE mask mandate guidance and masking policy, followed by action items, including consideration of the DESE masking mandate guidance, and then future agenda items, next meetings, and then adjournment. So with that, I'll just begin with a couple of very quick announcements. Just a reminder that the EFPBC meeting will be February 16th, tomorrow, at 6 p.m., was it?
6 p.m.
6 p.m. Next steps with the Lynch School project. And we also have kindergarten registration materials that are they're available now, and they are due back by March 7th. And kindergarten orientation across the district will be April 29th this year. Dr. Hackett, do you have anything further for
I do not.
communications? Is there anything?
Since you mentioned the EFPBC, just to put in a plug, no major decision making tomorrow night. However, at last week's meeting, we did vote on a preferred option for the new Lynch. That is a full replacement option. If anybody missed that meeting, if you go to the project website, lynch2025.com, the website's been updated. You'll find some links to that design, as well as some links to the meetings that WinCam keeps making available for us, so we really appreciate that.
Anything else from other members? Okay. So with that, we will move into public comment for this evening. And public comment shall be for a period of 20 minutes. It's not a discussion, a debate, or a dialogue between individuals and the committee. It's a citizen's opportunity to express their opinion on issues on the agenda or of school committee business. So any individual wishing to speak before the committee shall identify themselves by name and address and shall speak for no longer than 3 minutes. All individuals shall speak to the full committee through the chair and shall not address individual members or administrators. So we offer in-person comment, and we also offer remote public comment. And we've asked our in-person public comment to sign in on the clipboard with requested information, and we've also offered registration for public comment. And for remote public comment. And for our remote public comment speakers, we ask that you turn on your cameras and give your names and addresses, which is consistent with our in-person process. So today, or before we start, I will just note that school committee has received a number of emails that were designated for public comment. And I will not read them at this particular moment, but I forwarded these emails to our administrative assistant so that they can be included in the public record. And then with our in-person comment, actually, Dr. Hackett, how many people do we have for remote public comment, please?
Well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 6 people in attendance. I'm not necessarily sure that all will comment publicly, but there are 6 in attendance.
Okay. So seeing as how we have a number of people here for in-person public comment, we'll begin with in-person public comment. Since we have a number of people here and we try to keep to 20 minutes, then I'm going to ask you to please limit your comments to 2 minutes. Ms. Bergstrom will help us keep time. And I think we will also, just to be equitable, we will alternate with our remote public comment persons who had registered as well and go back and forth until we hit the 20-minute mark. And we'll see how we do from there.
And I'm going to apologize in advance when you hear the timer go off. That's your 2 minutes, just so you know that's what the noise is coming from my phone. It's not meant to be rude or intrusive, but just so you have an audible sound to let you know you've reached your 2 minutes.
Right. So we'll ask our first person to come up, which is Ruth Trimarke. And if you just want to take a seat at the table and adjust the mic so it's close enough so that we can hear, that would be excellent.
Thank you. And I actually am smiling under this, but can you also hear me? Can you
Yes.
pull the microphone all
Yes.
the way close to you so everyone at home can hear?
Thank you.
Is this a
Thank
little
you.
bit better?
Yes,
thank
that is
you.
better.
And thank you. Good evening. My name is Ruth Trimarke, Precinct 5, 11 Ridge Street, Winchester. I'd like to say that this is an exciting time here in Winchester, as we are fast approaching the right time to remove the mask mandate for our town and our schools. COVID cases are down, vaccination rates are up, and wastewater tracking for the North System, which includes Winchester, is at 159 COVID particles per milliliter as of today. As of yesterday, it's the lowest level since July 2021 and continuously dropping at a steady rate. That is very good news. Every indicator is that we are close to ready to lift the mandate, and I encourage the school board to reflect on the data, to inform us of any additional data you may have, and to weigh the imperative to keep our schools and communities safe with additional attention to the social, emotional, and learning constraints that masks may impose on some of our students. Families and students have worked hard to keep themselves and our communities safe. As we approach the right time to lift the mask mandate, I hope the school committee carefully considers not only when to lift the mask mandate, but how to do so, and to provide guidance for how to protect students and families from possible bullying if they choose to continue to mask up even after the mask mandate is lifted. I love this town, I love our community, and I value our ability to foster civil discourse even during challenging times. When the numbers are there, I'm ready to support lifting the mask mandate, and I know we are very close to ready. Caution and vigilance is still called for. I would ask the school committee to reflect on the upcoming vacation time and the likelihood that people will be traveling that week. For example, are there time and testing considerations around the vacation week that you are waiting? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Hackett, if we could have the first remote person, that would be great.
Timothy
Or they could also, I guess, okay, yeah.
we good?
Yep.
All right. Timothy Matthews, I'm going to promote you to panelist. If you turn on your camera, please.
There we go.
All right, can everyone see me? I just got in.
We can. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And just so
Hi,
you know, we have
everyone.
2
My name
minutes.
is Tim Matthews. I live at 23 Kenwin Road, and I'm also speaking tonight to echo some of the things that Mr. Markey just said. I think we all know that the scientific evidence is clear at this point. Both masks and vaccines work to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. In Winchester, we have work to do still to improve the number of residents who are up to date with their 3-shot vaccine series, those who are eligible in terms of their age, and to increase the number of our population who are 5 to 11 years old who are vaccinated. The continuing lack of vaccine access for children 4 and under is a concern, particularly for families like ours with younger ones in the household. I personally would like to see case rates and deaths in Massachusetts actually come down to a lower level that's more comparable with other moments in the COVID-19 pandemic, where we actually see a clear recession before removing the mask mandate school-wide. However, I understand that there are significant differences of opinion in town, and those who feel mask mandates should not have been in place even beyond 2020. The question now is how we all take collective responsibility for all the members of our community, regardless of their circumstances. For the school committee, this could mean setting a goal for boosters prior to mask removal if you choose not to continue with the mask mandate past February 28th. It could also mean waiting until those under 5 can get vaccines to remove the elementary mandate, as another example. It certainly means, as Ms. Trimarke said, being incredibly sensitive to the concerns around bullying for those students who may need to continue wearing masks to protect their family, friends, or neighbors. There are certainly options beyond all or nothing, and I hope that the school committee considers both the data and the incredible nuance of this difficult issue before moving forward.
Thank you very
Thank
much, Mr. Matthews.
Nicely timed.
That was. So next, we will return to an in-person comment from Mr. Matthew Roberts.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Roberts from 15 Brookside. I'm very pleased to be here with all of you. It's time to take off the masks. The good news is just pouring in lately. We've had coronavirus restrictions are being lifted around the world. And why now? It's because, like we've discussed, it's falling hospitalizations, weaker Omicron, vaccine availability, but most importantly, it's a wealth of data pouring in, comparing states and countries which did implement mask mandates and other restrictions to those that did not. Many studies, such as the latest one from Johns Hopkins, found no measurable difference in between outcomes as a result of restrictions. I believe we have all personally observed this when we compare neighboring communities in Massachusetts to our own community. More good news when it comes to children too. We've known for 2 years now the coronavirus presents no material risk to kids. So the most important point is this. I mean, making these kids wear masks all day is wrong. We shouldn't do it anymore. Most kids hate wearing them, and I think we can all understand why. Each of you tonight need to do the right thing for these kids and give them a break. Washington, D.C., L.A. have lifted mandates for bars, restaurants, or they're going to, but they're not doing it for the schools. Let's not have that happen here. We want the schools to come first. So let's do it. Think about how happy the kids will be if we can do it on Monday morning after the break. I mean, it's going to be great. We can be positive. It's safe. It's going to be okay, just as it has been in every school across the world where kids don't wear masks. Everything's going to be okay. I think you can do it, and I hope you can do it tonight. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Dr. Hackett will take our next remote public comment speaker.
If there are any more attendees remotely that would like to speak, please raise your hand. Oh, Michelle McCarthy, I'm going to promote you to panelist, Michelle. You could just turn on your camera and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can't
Yes,
see you
but
yet.
we need your camera
Sorry.
on, please.
That's okay.
Technical difficulties, I just got in.
You don't have to
Hopefully
tell
it's
me.
working.
Yeah. You
We
can see the
Oh,
understand.
great, you have
screen.
my picture and my face.
There we go.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I will be honest, I didn't get to really prepare a statement. I'm just running around kids with carpool. I am driving with children every day to numerous activities. I have 3 children who are all fully vaccinated at McCall, and I feel like I need to speak on their behalf. They want to take the masks off. You are members of our school committee, and I hope that you can remember that you were elected to help make sure our children in Winchester get the best education. We have done what we need to do. We have become vaccinated. We have worn our masks. We've followed all the rules. And watching many friends across Massachusetts and other towns and communities remove their masks, listening to Governor Baker tell us that we can remove masks, listening today to the Massachusetts Department of Public Health tell us that and recommend that we remove masks indoor. I ask that you all please listen to the experts who have put so much time and effort into this and are telling us at the state level We have many experts working for the Department of Massachusetts Public Health and recommending that we remove masks for children and remove masks for students and remove masks for people indoors. I hope that the school committee will listen. There are many parents listening. We know how hard everyone's worked. We appreciate all the teachers who've worked wearing a mask for all of this time. And we understand that there might be some people who want to keep it optional and still wear their masks, and we support that. But for the children that want to remove them and want to be educated, I hope that you will please listen to my family and many others that feel like they need to focus on education moving forward, and it's time to remove the masks. These kids need to learn. They need to, there's no chorus, there's no singing with masks. It's so difficult. And I just think it's really time for kids that are focusing on advanced algebra that it's time to take off the masks. They're ready. We've done what we need to do here in Winchester. Our numbers, I believe, in middle school are very high. We have followed the rules.
Ms. McCarthy?
Our vaccination rates are really high, and I hope that the Winchester School Committee will listen to the experts at the state and
Thank you.
please remove the mask mandate. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will now return to in-person public comment, and next up is Mr. John Dobbins.
Good evening, school committee. Good evening, WinCam. Up there, okay. Start your timer. Given the Commonwealth has announced that mask mandates will be lifted for K through 12, I strongly encourage the committee to perform risk analysis and factor in the following when deliberating whether to continue mask mandates for Winchester students. 1, what are the impacts on student learning, social development, and mental health? 2, how effective are cloth masks in preventing Omicron, if at all? 3, for those parents that are willing to accept the risk of their children not wearing masks at schools, what are the statistical health risks for both populations? And then finally, I just close with saying, if not now, what are the benchmarks and metrics the committee will use going forward to think about lifting the mandate? Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our next remote public comment speaker, please.
Stephanie's, I'm sorry.
Zaremba.
Zaremba?
Thank you.
I heard
Stephanie, I'm promoting you to panelist. If you could turn your camera on and unmute.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening. Stephanie Zaremba from 38 Park Ave. I would like to request that the school committee take 2 things into consideration. One is I beg you, please do not remove the mask mandate on February 28th, the day right back from winter break. I actually support shifting away from them. I agree that we are nearing a point of numbers, or maybe at a point of numbers where we can start to safely make the transition. But I was part of the group of parents who were in the footfall at the private Creative Corner preschool when they removed masks, and within 1 week had a huge surge of cases. And it would be so hard to have that happen. And I think we can avoid an obvious footfall. I think the state is making a pretty bad decision on that timing, and waiting 1 week would save some potential major disruptions to learning for the students. And so in the course of 2 years, I don't think 1 to 2 weeks is that much more of an ask. It's not going to be fine necessarily if we have people coming back from a lot of trips. And so I would ask that that be taken into consideration. And the second is just to echo what some others said. We need to make sure that all students can feel safe at school. We have children with pre-existing conditions, asthma or other things that need to be able to feel safe. Children like my daughter, who is completely safe herself, but lives with my husband, who's immune compromised, and she's going to have to probably keep her mask on for a little bit longer than some of her friends. And so I just hope that the school committee can work with the administration to do a really good job communicating to students about the importance of continuing to keep each other safe, to be considerate if they do have a classmate who is at higher risk and not create a situation where students can feel ostracized or uncomfortable because they have to protect themselves or a family member. And I just hope that kindness can be instilled in them even as they are excited to remove their masks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you.
Zaremba. Next, we will have Miss Erika Hoffman.
Thank you. My name is Erika Hoffman, 7 Fairlane Terrace. I have 2 children, a second grader at VO and a 4th grader at St. Raphael's. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. COVID is here to stay in the world and our community. There is always going to be some new strain or variant, and sometimes it may be more contagious or cause people to be sicker. I hear that people are concerned that this is not the right time after school break. My husband is a pilot and travels for work all over the country on a weekly basis. Travel does not increase the risk of COVID. People have been traveling for weekends throughout the school year. You are no more likely to get COVID from traveling compared to staying at home locally. Using travel is just a delay tactic. We need to get rid of the mask policy document as during flu season. During flu season, are you going to use this document to enforce masking in the future? There is talk of a phased-in approach. This is not needed, as our youngest elementary school children have been affected the most, and they have been the most compliant due to parent oversight in following the mask rules, compared to, say, middle school and high schoolers who have more autonomy. With an overall trend of the positivity rate going down, it is time that our schools remove the mask mandate and make it optional. I would also voice again about the bullying. I've heard of students who have been bullied because they haven't been fully vaccinated. So I stress that it's really important to communicate for people that are wearing masks and not wearing masks for children to not bully them. 2 years is a long time in our children's lives, and they need to have the freedom and learning experience of being able to see people's expressions and interact normally with their peers. We need to reintroduce field trips, parent involvement in the schools like it was before COVID, such as library duty, helping out at class parties, and volunteering at lunch. The lunch setup needs to change where children don't sit alone and don't interact with their peers. All these are what we think are small events or experiences really shape and develop our children for the future. Both our kids are on IEPs, and there has been little to no progress due to not being able to see mouths and words form. We also need to consult the Winchester Board of Health and not just the Director of Public Health and the Winchester Nurse Leader. And I have a list of schools, Catholic schools.
Miss Hoffman, could you, just to be in fairness to all of our other participants, if you would like to mail that to us, then I'm very happy to accept that and give that to our administrative assistant for inclusion.
That's fine.
So, but thank you.
And my last statement is basically, I wish the school committee makes a decision tonight that they have no male masks on February 28th. Thank
That's
you.
a spare copy. We can take that.
Thank you.
Oh, you can have this
Oh, yeah.
copy. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Perfect.
That's
Would like it.
Thank you.
Just leave it there. It's fine.
yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Next remote speaker.
Stephanada Blake, promoting you to panelist.
I have it looking like my desk is full.
You say Stephanada Blake?
Yes.
You may have to tell him to accept.
She's got it. Ms. Blake, we have you. If you could turn on your camera and unmute, please. We're so close. If you could unmute.
There we are.
Perfect.
Yay, thank you.
Good evening.
Okay, good evening. I'll be quick. I want to thank the school committee for their service in the past, few years. I know it hasn't been easy to be a school committee member. I just want to say that I'm in favor of pausing the mask mandate for our K through 12th graders. I do think there's a detriment to social emotional learning and academic learning. There's been examples of success with Hopkinton High School applying for a waiver and removing the mask mandate even last month and having success. I also don't think it has to be an all or none decision. The Winchester community has shown that it can be very agile in adapting to changing guidance. We've had through the Board of Health the indoor mask mandate put in and removed, and the Winchester community has been able to adapt to it. I think a lot has been taken away from our kids in the past 2 years, and it's time to give them something back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have reached the 20-minute mark. I will allow for, well, it's the 21-minute mark. I will allow for 10 more minutes of public comment. So our next speaker is Kristen Beltwell. Excuse me if I mispronounced that.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kristen Beltwell. I live at 1 New Meadows Road. I'm the mother of 3 young kids in the Winchester public school system. One is in preschool, 2 are in an elementary school. And I really would like to first thank you all for your dedication to our kids and keeping us safe, and educators, healthcare providers, on the committee, thank you so much. Your hard work certainly doesn't go unrecognized. I'm here today in full support of the recent DESE and Governor Baker's recommendations to remove the mask mandate or requirement in K through 12 population and continue to shift to an approach that focuses on personal and family responsibility and accountability. I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner practicing for almost 20 years now. And in my training and practice, we have been taught to focus on looking at the holistic problem, looking at the person as a whole. And I can apply this approach now to the advocacy of our young children and families in our community. Our children have undoubtedly been one of the groups to sacrifice the most for the greater health of our community. They have done so with such grace and strength. Generally, our young population is at the lowest risk for significant morbidity and mortality related to COVID-19, and we are now armed with the tools of vaccine and therapeutics to help protect them even further from serious related illnesses, COVID-related illnesses. I'm confident in that. With that said, I feel we must now prioritize our children's social, emotional, and mental health and return to more normalized in-school experience. I am confident that every family has experienced some of the unintended consequences of these pandemic-associated restrictions and major life changes. It's not unfair to say that our children are struggling from some of the highest levels of anxiety and depression. To remove the masks and allow them to return to a more normalized approach to school education could do so much for their confidence, allow them to interact and socialize with their peers in a more normal way, and improve their quality of education. With that said, I strongly urge you to vote in favor of the and be aligned with the DESE recommendations to lift school and mask requirement on February 28th. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. You said that was the last remote. So we will move on to the next in-person speaker, Miss Natalie Cole.
Hello. I live at 198 Ridge Street. Thank you guys for being here and for the last few years. I know it hasn't been easy. I'm here to voice my support in lifting the mask mandate and following the guidelines of the state. I have 2 elementary students at VO. One last year was put on a IEP for emotional support for anxiety. And then I just recently put in to have my first grader tested for support with reading and language, which I think it's just time. It's time for our kids to start leading normal lives, to have some normalcy, to lift these masks. Their kids are resilient, yes, but at what cost now? I mean, the data has shown that our kids are suffering socially, emotionally. Mental health is at an all-time high with our kids. The tears, the frustration, the anger that I am now starting to exhibit just with my own children is something new in our house, and it's sad. Why is Winchester different, than our surrounding towns? Why can't we make the same choice? Our numbers are comparable, if not better, to surrounding towns. So if this isn't going to end, then someone else stated when. Do we have a timeline? I understand that there's concern about the February 28th, right after break. But if not then when? What would be the plan moving forward? I think it's just time for these kids to get their childhood back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Miss Susan DeLeo.
Hello, Susan DeLeo, 24 Taft Drive. Thank you for taking my comment. I'd like to note that the typical course of action after watching many of these school committee meetings is that the people who are here in person are given the chance to speak first. So this would be a bit of a digression from that. But I'm happy to have the chance to speak. I support 100% the removal of the mask mandate in Winchester Public Schools. I support personal responsibility and personal choice. Winchester students and families have done a phenomenal job compliance with the mask mandate, as evidenced by our high vaccination rates, our quarantine compliance. Also today, Jen Murphy in the policy subcommittee meeting mentioned that as of September, when school started, 0 Winchester Winchester children ages 0 to 18 were hospitalized due to COVID. This is terrific news, and we should all be so thrilled to hear this. Please vote tonight to lift the Winchester Public Schools mask mandate for all students. Do not use a phased-in approach. Jen Markham today suggested possibly starting with the older students and then phasing in the younger students. Do not do that, please. Our youngest learners, they have suffered the most. They have been the most compliant. The elementary schools have enjoyed the lowest case counts. It is time to give them their childhood back. We have impeded speech and phonics programs by wearing masks. And further, our youngest children, their parents know their daily whereabouts, right? So we can follow transmission control protocols pretty easily when they're little, because we know where they are. Also discussed today was the policy regarding anti-bullying. No one should be picked on for what they choose to wear, whether it is you choose not to wear a mask or you choose to wear a mask. I believe that the school's anti-bullying policy already would cover this situation, but if you do not believe that, then the policy should support all students regardless of mask choice. I'd like to finish up with 2 things. One, generally, we do not create policy outside of our typical situations. We do not, we still provide peanuts to school cafeterias. We do not specifically protect nut allergy students. One of those students is my children. We should not make specific policy situation scenarios in this case.
Ms. DeLeo.
I'm going to finish up, I promise.
Because we do have 2 more speakers.
I
would like to give them
Usually
their
it's 3 minutes. Here we go. This school committee, many of the people on this school committee, did not follow Governor Baker's return to school mandate to the detriment of our children last September. Please do not wait any longer. Please do not wait on this decision. Make the right decision now. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, which one? We have 2. I'm willing to, yes, we will take the last 2 speakers. Next one is, and I'm sorry if I cannot read this, Mr. John Wilson.
Oh, I think you crossed out.
Oh, crossed it out?
Yeah.
Okay, then Miss Carol McIver.
Oh, yeah, I'm all set too.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay.
Anytime.
All right, thank you. So then, right on time, we will close public comment and move into the regular agenda. So we have tonight, we have a single agenda item just on the discussion of the response to the governor and DESE's announcement regarding the lifting of the mask mandate on February 28th, 2022. This announcement was made last Wednesday on February 9th. So as a summary of the steps that have been taken since then, Policy Subcommittee had met on February 11th to take an initial look at a draft response to this and some considerations around protecting our staff and our students. And Policy Subcommittee then met again earlier this afternoon, February 15th, to review the draft of the policy. So the subcommittee has considered the timing of the rollout, protecting students and staff who choose to continue to wear a mask, vaccination rates in our high school, middle school, and elementary schools, reserving the authority of school committee to reenact masking as necessary, and then some of the challenges around lifting a mask mandate, such as the timing of the repeal, just as students are returning from February vacation, and also having this and subject to collective bargaining with the Winchester Education Association. So school committee will now have the draft of this before us, and I believe Dr. Hackett will bring this up. We had also had Miss Jen Markham, the nurse leader from Winchester High School, and then also Miss Jen Murphy, the executive director of the Department of Public Health, at our policy subcommittee meeting this afternoon, just to discuss some of the community trends and the school trends around vaccination rates and positivity rates, and some of the things that they have been thinking about with respect to lifting the mask mandate. So, Ms. Bergstrom, do you have anything to add to that?
I think you did.
So,
That's an excellent summary of what we covered the last two meetings.
and I guess with that, I would turn it over to Dr. Hackett for.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everybody. Good to see you. So I thought what I'd like to do is just go through a couple of slides to kind of put everyone on the same page about what did happen, what was issued by the Department of Education and specifically the Commissioner, which happened actually last Wednesday. There was no forewarning that it was coming, even though we did know from the Commissioner's last communication that reconsideration of the mandate would be happening prior to March 1. But generally there's a conference call with superintendents just to kind of give people a heads up. I think the Commissioner's come to learn that superintendents can't keep their mouth shut, so I think he stopped doing that, which I think is probably a good move on his part. But I did want to just kind of highlight what was actually in the memo from the Commissioner, and this is available for anyone on DESE website. But the rationale for not continuing with the mandate from the department was the high vaccination rate that we have, availability of testing, which I will say the department has done a tremendous job with the testing program. Rocky start, understood. It was rocky for everybody, but the availability of testing for the most part throughout the course of this year has been extraordinary, and it's been really it's been a critical part of our mitigation efforts. As we know, earlier since returning from winter break in December, and we were dealing with Omicron variant, and we saw a really high spike in positive cases to the point where we were no longer able to keep up with contact tracing, really, and do it with fidelity, because we couldn't keep up with the number of positive cases that we had on a regular basis. Probably one of the best, quickest, smoothest transitions the department has made, they haven't all been smooth, nor have we been smooth all the time, was the allowance of districts to make the determination whether they wanted to stay with the contact tracing testing program, test and stay program, or whether or not we wanted to go into a more robust surveillance testing, which we chose to do that option, the latter, because it just made a lot more sense to us that the key was making sure that we were identifying students who were positive and keeping them out of school. At that point, too, the quarantine period changed, or should say the isolation period for COVID positive, and it was reduced to 5 days, return on day 6, non-symptomatic. We made that transition as well. That was a little rockier than in the beginning anyway. We really had to do a little bit more communication. Our nurses and Jim Markham, our nurse manager, did a tremendous job just making that change, ramping up the communication, making sure parents understood that what we were looking for was truly non-symptomatic, no symptoms if possible. We really kind of transitioned to that pretty well. I think that when I look back in the 3 seconds that I have to look back, when I think about what we went through on our return from December, decisions that were made by school systems around us and elsewhere to not come back to school the Monday, in some cases the Tuesday and the Wednesday after the December break, we didn't go down that path. We felt pretty strongly that we really needed to know what we were faced with. We had really no way for sure to know exactly how many of our staff were going to be able to return. And I think it proved to be the right solution, because what we did start to see is, was in that second week of the return, we started to see our numbers rise. That was a tough, difficult period to get through in terms of making sure that we had our staffing in place for supervision and instruction. But really, all year long, I think our administrators and our staff have just done an unbelievable job making sure that we have that coverage. With some exceptions, I think we've done, I think that has been relatively smooth. We've not had to close any classrooms. We've not had to close the school. We've been able to make sure that our kids are in school every single day, with the exception of the 2 snow days. And I didn't get a complaint on either one of those snow days, which is the first time in my career. In fact, got some praise on the first one, which it was 12 feet of snow, so it was kind of easy. So I think, and I wanted to frame that a little bit, because I also want us to remember that regardless of the question of masking, and we also have the real practical reality of the fact that we have to make sure that if people are positive, they are going into isolation, and they're in isolation for 5 days. Return on 6, no symptoms. That can still present a staffing problem for us. I personally believe, and I really do, in watching this over the last 2 years, I think the difference for us in many ways has been masking. I think it's hard to argue, in fact, in looking at our own data, that it has been, this year alone, we've really only been able to trace 2 viral spreads that we could associate to being in-school transmission. That's not to say there wasn't more, but to be able to pinpoint exactly where kids were at certain times, and generally it was lunch. That happened once, and then we also had a little bit of a outbreak in the 6th grade. So this is a big decision, and there isn't anybody sitting around this table who wants to go without a mask more than me. And I generally have a little bit higher risk tolerance around that anyway, but I'm also the superintendent of schools, and I'm also have the responsibility, as the people around this table do, to ensure the health and safety of our staff, all 800 of them, as well as over 4,000 of our students. That falls on us all the time if something happens. So if we have a student get severely ill, if we have a staff member get severely ill, we own that. We own a piece of that responsibility, unlike anybody else in this community does. So this decision, in looking at the pros and cons and where we are in this, we take very seriously. Everyone's tired of masking. I am truly tired of masking, but I also, and I'm a little bit looser with it in my own personal life, but as a superintendent of schools responsible for children and for staffing, I have to take my personal hat off. And so just to be clear, if we move toward an opt-in or a optional masking policy, we have to be prepared also for the potential that we're going to have in-school transmission, and that in-school transmission could be staff, which, number one, is concerning just from a health standpoint, but 2, we have to be mindful of the fact that we've held our staffing together pretty well this year to allow us to keep kids in school. So that's just something I think we need to be transparent about. I think we need to be open about it, and I think that, as we kind of think through these scenarios, if we were to have an outbreak in a school, for example, we would be too far into it by the time we knew we had an outbreak for masking to have an impact. That's not the cure when we don't have masks, if we have an outbreak within a school. Then we're talking about having to potentially think about shutting down a grade level, shutting down a school. if we run into a severe outbreak, and we'd be obviously working, and that call's not our call alone, it's with the Department of Health, but also with our own staffing and our ability to staff. So as we make these decisions, there are always repercussions and consequences on either side of this that we have to make sure that we're clear about and that we're planned as best we can for. And I believe that we're there. I think we are planned well. I think we've been very responsive and able to manage this over the course of the last several months. To be clear, masking will continue on school buses. That's federal. From an implementation standpoint, one of the things I said today at the policy subcommittee was, we're not going to come up to a bus stop and have a 7-year-old at a bus stop with no adult supervision and no mask on and not let them ride the bus when it's 25 degrees out in the morning. So we have to plan for that. We have to make sure that we are prepared to be able to manage that. The obvious solution would be to make sure that drivers have masks on the buses. But we also need to remember that kids are kids, and if I don't have to wear a mask in school, then I don't have to wear a mask at all. So the messaging, I think, is going to be confusing. I think there's going to be some transition periods that we're going to need to kind of just work our way through, which we will do. The department, and this gets lost in some of the messaging because I know everyone's excited about the fact that the governor's announced that we don't have to do this anymore, but the Department of Education and the Department of Public Health still recommend that students and staff follow all the protocols for isolation, because we're not doing contact tracing anymore, so we're not into quarantining, but also that we continue other mitigation strategies. So as we know, masking is one of our mitigation strategies. We have others that we're currently using, and I think we have to be really thoughtful about how and when we lift them, because I don't think we can just blow this wide open. I don't think it makes any sense to blow it wide open, and some of the mitigation strategies that we're using, such as physical distancing, require some significant physical structures and arrangements of, for example, furniture in larger spaces for cafeteria, for food service. We are still likely going to have a decent percentage of our students who are going to opt to mask. I, of course, agree with everything that's been said tonight about bullying. I mean, if we have students who are taking Advil, they shouldn't be bullied. So I don't think that's the question. I think what the question is that this is a significant change for our students and for our parents and for our population of kids. And like any time we go through a significant shift, it's going to be a very noticeable shift. I think anytime we go through something like that, it's incumbent upon us to be really clear, to manage expectations and be clear with students about just a reminder of the rules of school and good school citizenship. We also, obviously, individuals who want to continue to mask would be supported in that choice, which is connected to that as well. And we also the commissioner announced in his February 9th memo that he will continue to monitor public health data. My sense is that the state wants out of this business altogether, which I can understand. But the result of that is that it's now all local. And I have appreciated the fact that the state and the commissioner have provided local school superintendents and the school boards and kids with some cover around this issue. I think it would be very difficult if we were in a situation like we were last August and every individual school system was trying to make their own decision about whether to mask or not. So it has been helpful, I think, and it has made the difference for us to get through what I think has been a relatively successful school year by all counts. So what I wanted to do, these are some essential points that were discussed in the policy subcommittee meeting today around the draft policy, which I left on the printer in my office and ran down here to get this thing going. But I also thought what we could do is just kind of go through some of the slides that were presented today at the policy subcommittee. And I'm happy to do this or hand it off to either Ms. Bergstrom or
Tag team on this,
Okay.
if you like.
Could you go back to the prior slide just for a moment?
Oh.
The next one. Thanks.
You want me to go grab this?
It's okay, I'll go get it when you're going through. So we're going to come back to this one, Mr. Brady. Just
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So these are the vaccination rates. the average vaccination rates by grade level. So our K to 5 elementary vaccination rate average is 77%. Now the definition by DESE of fully vaccinated is 2 doses. And the range on this average across those 5 schools is 72 to 89. So we have schools that are at the 72% level, we have a school at 89%, and we have a few in between. But we are all above, all of our schools at the elementary level are above 70%. Just want to also make the point that as part of the announcement, there is no waiver process anymore. If you know, the department had in place that if you were at 80% vaccination rate, you could petition to the department to lift the mandate. That has gone away. So there is no minimum vaccination rate as part of any of these changes. That's all local decision and policy. I will just add anecdotally to this that, and I think I mentioned this, maybe I didn't mention this last meeting, we have done 2 vaccination clinics at 2 of our elementary schools during the day, during school. Can't get any more convenient. In those 2 schools combined, we only had 14 students who signed up for that. So I do believe that overall, we are probably seeing what is going to be the max of our vaccination rate, with the exception of the idea that we may have had some students who actually contracted COVID during the last few months or few weeks who may not be getting vaccinated yet because they're waiting for whatever the time period used to be recommended. I think there's some time period of waiting still in place. But I do think that we are at a point where we're probably seeing the top end of our rates. We will obviously continue to try to make it more convenient, but I feel better about the fact that I think, for myself anyway, and for us, I think we removed the question of whether or not it was an access issue by offering those 2 during the day in-school clinics and only getting 14 people to participate. So I think a chunk of this may be just parents just making the decision for whatever reason, for their own personal reasons, that they do not want their children to be vaccinated.
What does the range mean on middle and high school?
The range on the middle and high school, for the middle school range, it would be over the 3 grades.
So grades 6,
Like grade
7,
level.
8.
Right,
Okay.
right, grade level range.
Thank you.
So great vaccination rate at the middle school, 81 to 92 is the range. As you can see, that 92 is the highest vaccination rate of any grade level in the school system, with an average of 86%. And in grades 9 through 12, fantastic vaccination rate, and that rate has been that high, almost that high for quite some time now, which, as you know, at certain points during this year, we've had some conversations about thinking about lifting the mandate for the high school. Thankfully, I think given how it went over the course of the winter, December and January, that we didn't get into that. I do think that it is a very different thing for a Board of Health to lift a mandate and re-implement a mandate, because you can decide whether or not you want to go to Starbucks. You're not required to go there. Our kids are in front of us. They're our responsibility. They have to come to school. If they don't, there are consequences within the law for them being truant. So our kids show up because they have to, and they love it. But it's a very different change of behavior with students who are 7 years old, who are 14 years old, who are 15 years old, and 18 years old, in my view, than it is with adult populations that have the ability to make their own decisions as to what they're going to do with their own personal masking choices and where they're going to go to get their coffee, for example. So I think I understand the point. I just don't think it's necessarily the best analogy when we're talking about behavioral change. So along that line, I really do believe that when we make a decision to move away from mandatory masking, it would be a huge lift to go back into masking. We have to do it. We have to keep it on the table, obviously. It would be in coordination with the Department of Health. It would likely be in coordination, it could be statewide, depending on whether if another variant emerged that was really much more contagious and maybe even more lethal, then we would follow that. That would be easier. But for this committee on its own to make the decision to re-implement a masking mandate after having relaxed it or removed it, that's a heavy lift. It's a heavy lift for our administrators too. So the high school, though, the rates are great. 87 to 90 is the range at the high school. And I just want to make sure that we once again state, and we really haven't talked a lot about this publicly, but our memorandum of agreement with the Educators Association requires all staff to be vaccinated. That deadline happened prior to the December break, and that is in place. So our staff are vaccinated unless they qualify for one of the exemptions that our students can also qualify for. So when we talk about these numbers, these are student numbers, but when we think about our staff, we're for all intents and purposes, we are 100% vaccinated with our staff, and that's a critical, important point to make as we just think about these issues. This is kind of in a little bit more support of what I had mentioned earlier. I do think we've kind of maxed out on how many more students are getting vaccinated. This is a snapshot from data from January 22nd by grade level to February 10th. Not surprisingly, when you look at the right-hand side of this, at the upper levels and high school level, they've been high all along anyway. And we did see an uptick with grade, not surprisingly, right, with the change in who could qualify for a vaccination. We have seen a decent uptick in the lower grade levels. So, so that's, again, these are good rates.
And these are the fully vaccinated.
These are
rates,
fully
not the
vaccinated,
up-to-date,
right.
Not the booster rates.
Correct, correct.
Props to the class of 26.
Absolutely. So, and just also to remember that, we made that shift. I talked about it earlier. I won't go into it again, but we did make that shift in our testing program. We are testing as often and as early as we can. We are providing tests for take-home for parents and families and students. I feel very good about where we are. So in terms of, and it came up early, if not now, when? I think that's a great question. Candidly, I think now is the time. And I am less concerned about, I would be less concerned about doing it after the vacation break, because we know we're going to have an uptick. We're going to have an uptick every time we have kids go away. I think this break in February is more likely that there may be travel, but I believe that there'll be more outside. It won't be like as in December, families gathering in a living room, in a kitchen, all together to celebrate, and to have food together and meal. That whole December break is a lot about family gatherings and getting together. I think February is less about that. And I also think we are saying, at some level, if we go to an optional masking policy, that we are going to live, this is how we are now going to live with this virus, unless something changes dramatically that really changes the calculus on what we're dealing with. So I think this is a consequential decision from the perspective of what we're saying philosophically about how we're going to manage the virus. So when we talk about things or we hear things like what are the metrics that we would consider going back into masking, I think we need to make sure that if we've learned anything, we know that this has changed dramatically within weeks, what we've been managing and dealing with. I just think we need to make sure that we're allowing ourselves the room and the flexibility to adjust and adapt to those changes in a way that makes sense for the health and safety of our students. So with that, I'll just pop back to unless anyone has any questions.
Oh, and Ms. Murphy also made the point today that in looking at the longitudinal data that last February break, to reinforce your point, Dr. Hackett, that there was a small uptick following February break, but nowhere near the dramatic uptick we saw in 20 to 21 December coming back from that longer winter break. Right. That there was a small right. change, but not not the same delta that we saw from the winter break.
Right.
And I believe that
pre-vaccine for most people.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And I believe that chart is on the town website, just showing the data over time or the trends over time, and showing that there was a very large uptick in the number of cases in December of 2019 and then also in December of 2020. But in February of 2020, as February of 2021, excuse me, as Ms. Bergstrom was saying, the uptick in cases was much lower than what we had seen around the holidays.
And yes, it was pre-vaccination, but it was also pre-Omicron. So not the same transmission. Yeah. Transmissibility as we're seeing now, but it's still pretty there are some significant trends that you can see over time.
So here are the kind of the essential points that we pulled out of the policy that was looked at by the policy subcommittee earlier today. I will go down and get the hard copies and bring it to you because some changes were made as a result of that meeting that we've incorporated. So,
Karen, would you like to take them as chair, or you want me to take them?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So some of the, I'll just read off of this. Some of the essential points that came out of today's meeting were that school committee can maintain or impose a mask requirement absent a Winchester Board of Health or a DESE or a state mandate. And then also a district mask policy may be reinstated or rescinded by the school committee in consultation with the Director of Public Health, the Winchester's nurse leader, and the superintendent, at such time that viral transmission and virus rates indicate that such a change is necessary. And then also that school committee may designate its authority to the superintendent in consultation with public health to make changes in masking policy in emergent or emergency situations, and that any mask mandate or its repeal extends to any school-sponsored activities. And do you want to add some context and background to all of those?
Sure,
And
I can
I'll
jump
piggyback
in
too.
Yep, sure, I'll jump in now. So the ability of school committee to impose or maintain a mask requirement, this has really been the policy we've been following as a committee as we have moved along, and there have been some legal opinions from other districts and also from MASS, Dr. Hackett?
yes.
That indicate that that we do have the authority to impose that mask mandate in absence of Board of Health or DESE. But if Board of Health, DESE, or their state mandate for mask requirements, we can't say we will go mask optional even if they say there's one in place. So it's important that we understand the relationship between those two authorities. And a lot of the bullets under that are just all related to that those legal opinions, the authority. The last one is interesting because the MIAA came out and indicated that particularly for sports for high school students that they were also following local authority. So while Dr. Hackett mentioned that if students are on buses, they'll still be required to wear masks. And there are some other venues within our buildings, like the nursing and health offices, students will still be required to wear masks in. And by public health policy, if you're returning to school after your 5 days of isolation, you're still required to wear a mask for the continuing 5 days. So we may still have kids in our building, not only who are choosing to wear masks, but at times maybe still required to wear masks. Along with that, if our students go to a sports competition in a neighboring town where the town or the school committee has a mask mandate, our students are subject to those local rules and requirements. So even if our teams, if we repeal the mask mandate here in Winchester, when teams come to play us, they may choose to be masked or unmasked. It would be their choice. But if we go to a town that still has a mask mandate in place, our teams will still be required, at least for the time being, to wear masks. Yes.
Put a finer point on that, particularly with respect to winter season tournaments where the MIAA actually rents private venues. So
Yep.
not only may
True.
may a receiving district have restrictions, it's entirely possible, and the MIAA spoke to this in their memo on February 11. Private venues, as they do right now, in fact, may have masking protocols that our coaches and our athletes are going to have to follow.
The policy also talks about the ability for students or staff to continue to wear masks if they choose to do so. We thought that was an important point to put as part of the policy because just like any other, it could be, a mask could become just like any other item of clothing. Are you wearing a hat in school? Are you, any other part of the something that's out of the ordinary or additional. So we also felt it was important to sort of memorialize the right of students and staff to be able to continue to do that, particularly because we may have immunocompromised staff or students. They may have families at home that are, and we did not want it to be problematic for them if they continue to do so, even post rescinding of the mask mandate here in Winchester.
So with that, if it's okay with the chair, I'd like to just offer some kind of recommendations for consideration by the committee, and consistent with what we've heard tonight, I think, and supported by what we've heard tonight. The question of phasing is, to me, a little bit of a moot question, because I think phasing may happen naturally anyway, based on some of the things that we are required to deal with. So there are mechanics that we have to go through. As much as I'd love to think that I can write a memo and just make people do whatever they want, it's never worked that way for me. It would be so awesome if it did, but I think people understand that that would probably not be smart. We do have a memorandum of agreement with the Winchester Educators Association that specifically addresses some of the mitigation measures that we have in place, including masking. That is the same memorandum of agreement that people were asking a lot about as to whether or not our staff was mandatory for them to be vaccinated. So there can be a double-edged sword in terms of the mechanics or the process that we need to go through as a committee. That will need to be and has already begun. We have already reached out. We have a meeting scheduled for a little bit later this week to begin the process and the conversation around the provisions in the memorandum of agreement that would need to be modified in moving toward an optional masking policy. That process will look like all the other memorandum of agreement policies you've ever gone through, and that there will be a membership vote on any changes, and there'll need to be a vote by the full body of the school committee for those changes to be implemented. We're hopeful that we will be able to reach agreement, but it is a process that we're going to need to go through. The other piece of this, I just want to make the point, the current town Board of Health has a townwide masking mandate. Back to the policy discussion. So if the Department of Education or the local Board of Health has a mandate in place that's townwide or statewide, we fall under that. We don't have the authority to not follow those mandates. What you have the authority to do as a school committee is to implement a masking mandate if the other two bodies do not have one in place. So that will have to be lifted before the school committee can entertain lifting the mandatory masking policy that you have in place, that you put in place at the beginning of the school year. So a couple of mechanical pieces. We obviously also have a lot of considerations administratively about implementation, from the discussions about managing expectations with students and making sure kids are clear about what we're going to be looking for, to make sure that we have students who are immune compromised, that we've made considerations for them, in which that happens whether we're in a pandemic or not, right? There students who are truly have some conditions that really put their health at risk. We generally are on a 504 plan, and we have measures in place to protect their health. Those numbers are very low in terms of what we have on record, but they are obviously critical and our most vulnerable students. So the other piece is the busing. We talked about that. Transportation, kids that have to have they do have to have masks on transportation. I would also like to suggest that the committee consider authorizing us to allow our athletes to be able to play by the rules of the venue they're in. So that it would not make a lot of sense to me for our athletes to go to a neighboring town for a game. That town does not have a masking mandate, yet our students are under our masking mandate, even though they're not with us, and they would have to wear masks during that competition. I think that for a lot of reasons that just doesn't make any sense to me. Some of the masking in athletics hasn't made a lot of sense to me anyway, including wrestling, which my son used to do, and there's so many different things you can get doing that sport that are wind up with a lot of creams and salves and stuff that you have to do. So I think that would be helpful for us. I think is very confusing, even though athletes would still have to have masks on when they're riding the bus to the venue. So that's not listed here. But so my recommendation would be to have the committee, and this doesn't have to be tonight because of the things we talked about earlier in terms of the timeline on some of the other things down below, but the Winchester School Committee vote to transition from mandatory universal masking to an optional masking policy K through 12, maintaining our preschool mandate. Our preschool students do not qualify for vaccination. We do have that population is vulnerable for a variety of reasons. I think we should not make that move now, and we'll just kind of measure that and see where that all goes as we go down the road with we hear more information about vaccination for children who are under 5. And to authorize the interim superintendent of schools to implement the optional masking policy over the coming weeks in coordination with the town health department, nursing department, school administrators, and educators. So what I'm suggesting to you is for you to make the decision to move to an optional masking policy and then allow us to do what we would have to do anyway, which is the actual implementation of that policy. I would love to tell everybody that will be, everybody would be out of mask on the 28th or the 8th or the 9th or the 15th, but the reality is some of these processes are not necessarily within our control, and we need to go through them. We understand, I don't want to say the sense of urgency because it's not, we understand the importance of this issue and to work through it efficiently and effectively to make this happen. I'm candidly concerned about our administrators in trying to enforce a masking policy, particularly at the high school level, even the middle school level, but the high school level in particular, and our teachers, when students know that there is no statewide masking mandate. And we've had our student reps here talking about, that they have for quite some time wanted to have masking mandate lifted. So that's going to be a piece of work. We obviously will manage it, and high school administration and teachers will have it well under control. But I think for kids, there's some mixed messaging here. The longer we stay within a mandatory masking policy when, in fact, the state has lifted it one, and they're also going to be, around other students from other communities who also have had those communities lifted. So there is we want to make this happen. We want to make it happen in a smart way. We want to make sure we're doing it in a way that protects the health of our students and our staff. This is the only thing right now that I think we should be focused on. I understand the conversations around some of the other things that we have in place in terms of mitigation measures. I would not want to combine going to optional masking at the same time with eliminating the physical distancing we're doing at lunch, for example. I think we just need to have people give us some time, be patient, and let us do this right. Because what we don't want to be doing is coming back to you and saying that we have to shut down a school for a week because we don't have enough staff, or we have we need to. This is complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. These are human beings that we're talking about that we work so hard to make sure that they have good routines, understand the rules, where we have fair and appropriate consequences, and there's an education component to this that's going to take a little bit of time. Again, having said that, my hope would be that we would, over the next several weeks, and that we would be across the board being able to implement the unoptional masking policy. It would make the most sense if we're thinking about phasing at the high school, just because of the rates and some other factors at the high school level that I think make sense. But in my mind, I think that it's one bigger discussion, and whether it turns out to be phased or not would be kind of independent from my perspective of what the right implementation approach would be. So I would that also just want to say that we need to be at a WIFI meeting at 7 o'clock, so I'll stop talking.
Well, I'd like to put a note in the preschool, because we didn't talk about that today, but actually DPH came out with some new guidance today, perhaps while we were in that meeting, and as tends to happen to us. But they, to reinforce your maintaining the preschool mandate, they did also indicate that anyone over the age of 2 that was unvaccinated or immunocompromised continue to wear a mask in indoor settings. So I think that would be actually consistent with the public health guidance that both the CDC and DPH are continuing to reinforce for anyone unvaccinated. So I think our preschool fits in that over 2. They're all over age 2.
Yes.
But
yes. Yep. Happy to answer any questions or take suggestions, comments.
Can I just make, I'd like to make an observation that in many ways, it's a lot, for this to happen, parties have to come together, reach a mutual agreement. As you said, there's a collective bargaining process. 2 parties have to get to yes, whatever yes looks like. In many respects, I feel like it's a lot easier for us, and I appreciate the different points of view that we've heard. There's only 5 of us. We have well over 400 employees. Ms. Kirby can tell me exactly. It's close to 450, something like. It's a big group. Higher.
600.
Well, I'm thinking just about Unit A. Excuse me. There's Unit A, Unit B. Yes. So forgive me. I'm thinking about the teachers. We have multiple units of the WEA. We're talking about hundreds of employees. These are not a monolithic block. So just as we have constituents in the community who are eager to go back to as much normal as we can on the 28th. There are some who approach this with more trepidation, and for some in particular with unique sort of family situations, it's almost fearful for them. It's a small, but it's an important group for me as well. And so I think our employees are really kind of in a similar situation, right? So our union employees need to have some conversation, and they have to get to yes, and then we sort of come together. And this takes time. I'm absolutely thrilled that we're at a place now where we can have this conversation. I spent some members here remember I was the one who made the amendment to our return to school plan back in August of 20 and specifically wanted to know what it was going to take for us to talk about not just further restricting our operations, but how and when and how could we sort of relax them. And in a blink of an eye, we're here, but at the end of the day, we still have to come to an agreement. And as happy as I was to know what Charlie Baker and the commissioner, were thinking, kind of wish we didn't have a week of school vacation, immediately following their announcement. Our runway is very short. And from my simple thinking, as I was sharing to a resident the other day, I almost feel like to make the 28th happen, the end of the runway is like Friday. I will not call them out. I want to recognize some of the people very close to this process, including some of our administrators who have, changed family vacation plans over this February break, to work hard to try to make this happen as quickly as possible. I appreciate it very much. I appreciate how hard everybody has been listening and thinking and working to make this happen. So I'm generally in support of everything you said. And to whatever extent we need to, add language around athletics, I would support that as well.
And I would love to tell you I have a nice, tidy, well-written, crafted motion for you to look at, but I don't, because this has been a moving target since 1:30 this afternoon at Policy Sub, and then an issuance of new guidance from the Department of Public Health.
Is unanimous consent simply helpful based on the slide you have before us in our discussion, if it's simply consensus?
I think a vote would be good, only in that you did vote to implement the mandatory masking policy. So I think at some point you would need to vote to move to a different policy. And again, it doesn't have to be tonight because wheels are already in motion, and unanimous consent is all I need to know to start. And I've already started pieces of this. So.
I could try to make a motion, but I just want to make sure that we're not moving too fast on that, because we've heard from Mr. Nixon. But
Yes, I was about to
say that as well.
because Mr. Brady has his hand up, and
I couldn't even see that behind me, but.
Thank you. So I certainly appreciate all the feedback that we've heard from the community. I'm heartened as an educator, and I will say I hope it continues the engagement well beyond masking and COVID. It's important and it helps, so I encourage everyone to stay engaged and thank those that have been so engaged. In terms of the bullying, someone brought that up, and I would just want to concur that I think our current policy as it stands would certainly cover any issues that may arise around bullying for masking or not masking. I'm confident in our administrators and our educators and their ability to handle that. So I feel good about that. I think it's good to note it and make sure that everyone is aware. And I know that our families will do that and will support making sure that all of our students are treating each other the way that they should. Just another note, I know we're talking about the fact that students will need to wear masks on transportation. I would note that as far as I know, and anyone can correct me if they have other information, masks are still required by the TSA through March 18th. So I think it's just something that all of our students and families can understand. There are still, no matter what decision is made, there are still going to be these situations where you have to wear a mask, and that's just what the expectation is, and I think that's good for everyone to understand. I'm not sure what the status is on doctors' offices, but I know at certain points when masks weren't required elsewhere in Massachusetts, they were still required in a lot of medical places. So I think everyone's going to need to learn to live with that there may be places where masks are required and there may be places where masks are not required. Lastly, I'll just say I do think that if possible we should have a vote tonight. I think that we should move forward in some capacity. I would not want to wait. I certainly don't want to keep Whiffy waiting, but I certainly would like everyone on our committee to be able to say what they need to say, and I think we can accomplish that and have a vote and not keep Whiffy waiting too long.
I'll be the one in trouble, not you anyway, so.
Mr. Hopcroft.
Well, thank you, and I do appreciate also, I won't go through the whole list of all of the people who have been doing a lot of work. This is a very important issue, and it's an issue that our town is very passionate about on all sides, in some cases for real life and death issues and mental, social, emotional, etc. My sense is that the numbers are moving in the right direction. I'm pleased by the direction they're going. As I understand what you're asking here is you're asking for us to vote on a policy that directionally we think we want to move towards an optional masking mandate, relaxing and moving to an optional masking mode, with the details and timing and phasing and whatnot to be determined by the superintendent to implement this. Which I think is reasonable, and I think I can be supportive of that. I'll say my only hesitation with it is, I feel that, by all accounts, we're on final approach and we're coming in to land here. Maybe we've even touched down at the airport. I'd like us to taxi to the gate and before we disembark the plane. But I'm comfortable with what you've said, Dr. Hackett, around that the timing may work itself out. That the numbers and whatnot, we need to go through the WEA process. That you'll be thoughtful in terms of phasing if that's the appropriate way to do things. In my mind, for instance, it's a much easier call for you to consider the high school students, where they are more vaccinated, higher vaccination rates. There's less likely to have a sibling under 5. They're more able to be home if they do get sick on their own without having the parents have to stay home. But I'm okay leaving that to you as well. And I think, thinking back on the public comment from the people who are very concerned about the, right after break and immunocompromised folks, that, again, I feel like the numbers, I would love it if we were landed in at the gate, and I'd be absolutely, all over this. I think we're going to get there. It sounds like, by the time you work through the process that you need to work through, we'll get there. And so if anything changes in that, I'd love to have you come back to us. But in the direction we're going, I can be supportive.
I just would echo what everybody else has said, and I would just throw my support behind at least beginning with the high school on the 28th. I think it has also been curious to me why they did not wait a little while after vacation. However, we seem to have a lot of success with coming back after vacation. We didn't see dramatically higher rates in our district than districts that chose to take a day or two off. And it does beg the question of if not when, and I think particularly for high school students, coming back after a break and beginning a new routine is a really logical place to start. So I can see some logic in that thinking, that is a logical break and a logical place to begin a change. So I can appreciate that. I do want to also acknowledge everybody on both sides of this issue, not just for this issue today, but for the last 2 years. Because every decision that this committee, that DESE has made, that the state has made, we have our own personal reactions and emotions and our own families and friends that we think about as being affected by these decisions. And then as Dr. Hackett said, however, we have to make decisions for all of the students and staff in this district. So it's a matter of weighing all those opinions and facts and emotions in coming to a good decision that we feel will keep our students and families safe and also provide the best educational environment for our kids going forward. So I appreciated everybody's support tonight that acknowledged that this isn't an easy decision yet again or an easy process, and nor has it been for the last couple years. So I just thank the community for working with us, and for, to Mr. Brady's point, understanding that there are some places that going forward in the next few weeks or months, students may still be asked to mask, parents may be asked to mask, and just understanding that this is a process. We're all working towards the same goal, which is keeping everybody happy, healthy, safe, and well educated here in Winchester.
Can I just add one more thing?
Yes.
That I just wanted to also thank you. I wanted to also just highlight that the immense pressure that will be on our kids who are immune compromised, who have family members who are immune compromised, when they come to school. If you're particularly, I'm thinking like a middle schooler, and all of your friends have their masks off, and they're like, "What are you doing? Mask mandate's been lifted. You don't need that." As much as the family may say, "Hey, it's really important," it's going to be really, really hard for the kid to comply with that. And so if we could just, obviously I know the team is really amazing here, but to be extra thoughtful about how do we, it's almost like the personal pronoun equivalent, how do we make it a safe place for people who need to wear masks? Maybe even encouraging, maybe we should have a strong advisory that people continue to wear masks in certain places or something. I'm not sure what the solution is, but I do worry that there will be kids who will be put in a position where social pressure might be stronger and the consequences might be severe.
And I think, Mr. Hopcroft, I heard that in what some of the people were asking was not about our bullying policy, but about just a request to really have for the leadership team to lead and to send messaging on how to have conversations with kids about, and we have to do this every day, right? And educators have to do this every day, talk about accepting differences and appreciating those differences in and among students too. So I think that that is integral to what our teachers are already used to doing in the classroom. So I'm encouraged by that too.
And I think we very likely will have staff, teachers, administrators who choose to wear masks for whatever reason, whenever they feel that it's something that they want to do. So I think that's worth highlighting as well. That's a conversation I've started to have with some of my staff, with the nurse at my school. We were talking about it today. What are we going to do when the district I work in decides that they are ending the mandate and making it optional? So I think obviously Dr. Hackett will lead in that regard with the rest of our staff in terms of what different message can you send as an adult, and how does that help support all of our students? Because again, I think you both make great points that we just want to make sure that every student feels supported in their decision, whatever it may be.
And that's the worst part of this for me, is that I've already decided I'm going to continue to wear a mask, even though I'm not mandated to wear it anymore. And I've already explained that I wish I didn't have to wear masks. So,
Right.
yes.
So I guess I'm just thinking and listening and reflecting on what each of you has said, and my thoughts echo many of the things that you've said. And one of the things that we talked about today at the policy subcommittee was that there is no zero risk scenario, and that we have to be we just have to decide how much risk it is that we can each tolerate. So I guess when I look back at the last 2 years, 2 years since March 2020, we are in a completely different place than we were at that time when things were just starting and we were feeling our way, trying to figure out how to get through school closure and all of that. We are in a completely different place, I would say, even from a year ago, when vaccines still were just out for the general population, but it was just starting to roll out for our kids, for our oldest kids, and then gradually for the elementary school, for the middle schoolers, and then now through the elementary schoolers. And then I guess just watching the trends of the data over the last few years, and then more recently, I'm encouraged by how the trends with our data have been going. It's been scary, but now I'm beginning to feel a little better about the place that we are in at this point. So I guess I feel encouraged by what you've said, Dr. Hackett, and about the different, having masks be optional for our students and taking up a multi-step approach and just understanding that this is a multi-step approach to get to that point. I'm glad to see that you also considered with the preschoolers, our youngest population who are not yet vaccinated, that there's consideration of them as well. And I also appreciate very much from the conversations that we've been having at the policy subcommittee level and then hearing from the community that we really need to lend support to those students who do choose to wear masks and staff who do choose to wear masks. Because as I think this committee and Dr. Hackett have all expressed, we really do have to look out for everybody, not just ourselves. We're thinking about everybody in our community, of our staff and our students. So
I'm happy to try it a motion if people are ready.
Thank you.
And to clarify, the consensus is around a phased-in approach.
I'm requesting that not be part of the motion.
Okay.
Only because I think
Yep.
we'll see how the process plays itself out.
So I would move that the Winchester School Committee removes the Winchester Public Schools mask mandate for K through 12, effective February 28th, 2022, per DESI guidance, and pending the removal of the town-wide mask mandate by the Winchester Board of Health. We would give Dr. Hackett the authority to develop a plan for that in coordination with the Director of Public Health and the nurse leader.
I have a question too, but you raised your hand first.
Yeah,
In
so,
negotiation with the WEA.
Thank you.
so the question I had was,
Had that over
do
here.
we need a second
that-
in order to discuss this?
I'm happy to second Michelle's motion.
Okay.
But
Okay, and then I will open it up for discussion.
okay, thank you. The motion sounds like, I'm trying to play this as a
Yep.
resident of our town, like on February 28th, I don't need my kids to wear a mask. And I believe what we're doing is delegating the authority of when you don't need to wear a mask to the superintendent, who, based on the conversations and the negotiations with the WEA and all the other factors that he talked about, will determine the actual implementation or phasing in of when that date is. So I'm not sure if it means just removing the date in there, but if, and I'm not sure if I'm understanding it correctly, the intention here, but was that the intention?
Is, as you have stated it, and as you have said it, it might be good to not have the date, or have the date as a, due to with the governor's or commissioner's announcement of mask mandate not being in place after the 28th, and then the rest.
Should we say as early as?
Or might we say subject to the authority, like once we have the authority for the DESE mandate gone, the Department of Health mandate gone.
That was in there.
The WEA.
That was in there.
Yeah, so I think the date is misleading.
So with what you had without the date of the 28th?
I look to the
You
committee.
want to restate a revised motion?
You want me to restate it? I would move that the Winchester School Committee removes the Winchester Public Schools mask mandate. We give the authority, pending the removal of the townwide mask mandate by the Winchester Board of Health and negotiation with the WEA. We give Dr. Hackett the authority to work with the Director of Public Health and the District Nurse Leader to develop a plan around removing the mask mandate.
Second.
So there was nothing in there about preschool, so we have to add that in.
K-12.
Okay.
I'm wondering also, and I appreciate that. That actually is better, and I'm probably okay with that. But I wonder, can we just simply delegate the authority of when all the factors are met that the superintendent can lift the mandate? I mean, can we just delegate that, or do we need to actually lift the mandate? Because again, it sort of implies.
You have to actually vote to lift the mandate because we put it in place.
Yes, we put it into place, so therefore I think we have to vote.
Okay, so maybe we vote to lift the mandate subject to implementation that's delegated to the superintendent? It seems that there's another step
I think,
in there.
so your initial action was to implement a universal mask mandate.
Yeah.
You are now going to lift that universal mask mandate and authorize the superintendent of schools to implement a plan for
Can I just say, so I just want to be clear that the kids can't take off their masks until you've jumped through the hurdles that you
Correct.
need to jump
Right.
through.
Right.
And so
Yes.
it just, again, to a layman, it sounds like we've lifted the mask mandate, the Facebook is going to light up, mask mandate, school committee has lifted the mask mandate for students, and on the 28th, everyone's going to show up with no masks on. And so I just, if that's not the intention.
Anyway.
But if that's not the intention, I just want to be clear what the intention is.
Can I ask Dr. Hackett to bring up his recommendation slide,
Uh-oh.
which I think would be helpful?
I say uh-oh because I'm cheating a little bit and was in the WIFI meeting. Not with my face, but. It's going to take a second.
I am supportive of what I think the intention is that we have here. It's really just
The language
I
is
just want to be
important.
clear that we're saying what we
Yeah.
mean.
It's
No, we want
important.
it to be clear to
Yeah.
everybody.
You're essentially authorizing me to determine.
The date.
The date.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
could just say date as to be determined by the superintendent, but no earlier than February 28th.
And that's only because the governor, if the governor changed his date, I mean, it's really no earlier than the state will allow and the
Right.
local Department of Health and WA.
Right.
Yep.
Also, could I just ask, as a procedural thing, do we have to take back the previous motion that was made and seconded?
You could amend the
Anyone,
We can have-
It can
the
just be
proponent can
amended.
also
Can we-
withdraw
Yeah,
the
the
motion.
proponent
Withdraw
to
it, that's the word
withdraw.
I was looking for.
Both.
Thank
And I
you.
think there's the date and the hurdles that we have to get through it, but also you may determine that phasing or some other thing, I mean, I'm not saying that it is, but it's not just the date, but also the manner in which it's rescinded. Or which it's implemented. We're rescinding it. You're implementing it.
So can I ask just a question? Could a motion not be that the school committee directs the Winchester Public Schools to transition from a mandatory universal masking mandate to an optional masking policy for grades K through 12 while maintaining a preschool mandate? And further, that the committee authorizes the interim superintendent of schools to implement the optional masking policy over the coming weeks in coordination with town health department, Winchester Public School nursing, school administrators, and educators.
Almost like it was written for you.
Second.
Yes.
Oh,
If that was
so
a-
that's a motion I'm making.
I'm
But-
seconding it.
No, I amended pending negotiation with the WEA and the removal of the town-wide masking mandate by the Board of Health.
Second.
Third.
So can we vote the
I
amendment?
officially removed
Can
the
we,
policy.
can we vote the
Okay.
amendment proposed by Ms. Bergstrom?
Yes, we had a second, so I would just ask all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And aye.
And
Does
now
this
to
need
the
a
amended
roll
main
call
motion.
vote? Because, do we need a roll call vote on this? I believe.
doesn't-
we
I
have
don't
it.
think so.
Everybody raised
They
their
never-
hand.
We're all in
Okay.
person.
We just amended the motion, so now we have to vote the amended motion.
Right.
So, all in favor of the amended motion?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Almost like it was written
the
for.
vote was
Just
unanimous.
like it was written for.
Yes.
I might
You know,
Were
this is
any
the-
English
Very too
majors
soon.
involved?
I
Go
was
too soon
thinking
on the
that
stop
the
share.
first time he had the slide up. I was thinking that the first time he had the slide up, that
Okay, I'll own that.
and
So,
Do you feel the weight on your shoulders now?
it just
Yes.
landed like an albatross.
and I believe we heard that the Department of Public Health is meeting on Thursday to
Yes, the
review-
Board of Health is
Yep.
meeting on this Thursday.
to review the
so-
town-wide masking up.
Yes.
And they're live streaming the meeting, as I understand, so.
Yep.
folks
Okay,
can tune in.
excellent. And we will, Dr. Hackett will still be meeting with our Winchester Education Association.
And I would just add, Dr. Hackett, and maybe for the committee as well, that the intent of that vote is to not extend out the masking mandate for weeks and weeks beyond the 28th, but just
Right.
that there are
Yeah.
a number of other factors that we're aiming for our changes to begin on or as soon after the 28th as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the recognition that all the trend lines are likely to.
Though we
to-
haven't
to-
put a date in
to
there.
get there, yeah.
Yeah, that's, the intent is to follow the DESI guidance as close as we possibly can, meeting all the other considerations that we have.
Okay. So let me just see. So, we have future agenda items, which, now they're off the screen again, but we have building and facility update, food service contract update, interim superintendent formative assessment, the calendar, and a district goals update. Any other items that we should be cognizant of at this
Just
point?
to clarify, will the district's goals update include some of the academic data?
Yes.
Okay. Particularly the Dibbles data would be in there?
Well, yes. I mean, I
Great.
guess I'm hesitating, only thinking about just, is it at the same time or right after?
Later.
Sure.
Yep. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, my intent is to bring, with Dr. Alamema, a more complete
Yep.
report.
Thank you.
Then we have our next meetings, which will be March 8th, March 22nd, and April 12th, all at 6 p.m. Yes. I
Based
think
on
we-
late-breaking events today,
Yes.
that Dr. Hackett, I'm sure, can share with committee members later, we may have need for an executive session that first week of March. Tuesday is the 1st, Thursday is the 3rd. That might be able to be like remote. Not suggesting we schedule anything, but we hadn't really talked about that. Mr. Brady gives a thumbs up. So it would, I believe, be a single item executive session.
Tuesday, March 1st, Dr. Hackett and the Finance Subcommittee and the chair may be at a finance.
When is that tentatively?
Starts at 7:30.
PM?
It's not tentative, we will be there.
PM.
7:30 PM,
Yep.
okay.
So we can do it beforehand.
So if, might people be available at 6 PM for an again, we're not like locking things in, but that might work?
Remotely.
Remotely.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
yep,
Definitely
remotely. And then possibly on the 3rd, could that be an option for people as well?
For both dates, or?
See if either of those work.
Prefer the
Third's
first
not
one.
as good.
Less so.
Yep.
First is better. Okay, thank you.
I could do the third later, but
Okay. That's helpful, thank you. So I would just ask, maybe tentatively pencil that in. Would 6 PM be okay, Dr. Hackett, on the 1st? Okay.
Okay. Thank you. And,
More details to follow.
okay. Thank you very much. And with that, I would accept a
motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to WinCam, and thank you to our community for your support and engagement.
Thank you, everyone.
That Tuesday.